the way that we deal with our own emotions is how we respond unconsciously to other people emotionally. Most men actually don't know what that means to be emotionally available. Why doesn't everyone just choose that more naturally? Well, they don't know that emotions are a messenger with a message. If you avoid it, then the emotions will come up when you don't want them to. And I think that's a powerful message, is how do I actually gain emotional control? It's a consistent decision to go toward the emotion, to try to understand it.
There is a way to choose a better life, and that's what a real man would be, is strong enough to choose for himself.
Acting on emotions as guides to truth. Stillness. Surrendering to what is. Seeking. Using my gifts with purpose. Light. This is the emotional blueprint.
What's that?
Let's talk about relationships. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that men have about what's important in a relationship?
Well, I mean, it might just branch from the needs, like societal needs from the past and things, but I feel like men think that if they work hard enough, it'll like cover everything else. If I just like work hard enough, it'll blanket all the other problems, and that's enough.
Like it should be enough for a woman for me to be a financial provider.
Mm-hmm. There's food on the table.
She should be happy with me. I don't understand why she's not. Like I'm working really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm paying the mortgage.
I think that one I've seen in my own life.
I was talking to one of my clients, a couple, the other day, and I asked the question, a term that's thrown around a lot in the therapy world is being emotionally available.
Yeah.
And I asked the question with this couple. I said, what does it mean to you to be emotionally available? And I sat there and I was so stoked about the answers that were about to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing. They both had I could tell the woman had an idea, like a pretty good idea, but she was waiting for she wanted the guy to answer first as like some, power move.
Yes. Or she just wanted him to say it.
So she's waiting for him to answer. And just like crickets.
Mm-hmm.
Most men actually don't know what that means. Yeah. What does that mean, Ernest, as an expert emotional man?
First thing that ever comes to my mind whenever someone says those keywords like emotionally available, I think a port as place of safety where they can have their emotions, and that you can receive them and not have some horrible reaction to whatever's going on, or be unable to take on whatever emotions they have there. I think being available is having a safe space, both for your feelings and for their feelings, and to be a steward over that safe space.
What I see all the time is the gaps for men in their intimate relationships are stepping more into the feminine, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then for women, the biggest gap is for them stepping more into the masculine in the relationship. And we'll talk about what that means. But for men, the biggest gap, and what most men seem to miss, and like, why isn't my relationship going that well? Why am I not feeling that connected? Why I'm providing financially, I'm doing everything I should do, but my wife isn't happy with me. It's because one of the most important things that most women want is they want, like you said, they want a man that is going to be intentional at taking time to ask you personal questions beyond how was your day?
What actions did you accomplish today? That's usually like the only
Yeah.
question.
And that's a masculine question. That's not an emotional or feminine question. But like, wife, like, what's been tough for you lately?
Yeah.
Man, like what have you been really kind of thinking about lately? What's kind of been on your mind?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's questions that people can tell that are just blanket, like, how was your day? That's the easiest question. As it takes almost no effort. It's just like a robot question.
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT can ask me that.
Exactly. If it's like if like the postman could ask you that question, you probably could go deeper, you know?
Right.
If some random person's going to ask the same questions.
So one of the best things that a man can do to develop more of an emotional connection with his wife is to intentionally take time and ask her personal questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even start off by looking some up online. Like, what are some emotional questions I could ask?
Yeah.
And you can start there.
Mm-hmm. They've got all kinds of conversation starter boxes that are like for relationships to like get to know the person you're with. I'm not a big fan. I get really bored of those, but that's a way to do it. Like you could learn that way. Something that I've found in my own relationship that's really special is being able to stop after something's happened and reflect with your partner.
So cool.
It's one of my favorite things to do is when something unexpected or powerful happens, just being the person to stop and be like, hey, how did you feel about that? Like, what happened for you? Because this is what happened for me.
So you're a really good example of that, obviously.
Try.
Why does that come so naturally for you and come so unnaturally for most other men?
I am pretty sure that I have had a double dose of feminine energy throughout my life. Like
God gave me 2 shots of
double.
feminine.
Yeah, there's 2 scoops. I think that's really how it works. Some of my biggest heroes, if I think back in my life, people I looked up to the most weren't all men. My grandma is one that I looked up to as a mom and as a leader, as someone who really brings people together. And she was always the woman who at church would be like, I'm the waterworks person, sorry for crying. Like, she was very emotional and open about the way that she felt. And she was that way in the home and outside. People like that, most of them were women that I saw do that in my life. And I looked up to those people. So that kind of like instilled that's okay, that it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to be emotional. Totally nothing wrong with that. Express yourself. That's probably the biggest reason why I'm like, it's second nature almost.
I want to get in on this question too.
Okay.
One of the big reasons, because I've gotten to know you pretty well, why is it so natural for some people to be able to be emotionally available for other people? Why does that come so naturally? So why is it that when something difficult happens or when something emotional happens, it's so natural for somebody to ask emotional questions? Why is that the case? A big part of the reason is because the same way that we deal with our own emotions is how we respond unconsciously to other people emotionally. Example, if I'm a dude and I'm used to avoiding my own emotions, then when my wife or my partner opens up to me about something that's been difficult emotionally for them, I'm going to unconsciously avoid it by saying things like, like, you should just do this, or like, oh, dang, and then switch topics.
Yeah, well, that sucks. And then you just keep going with what you're doing.
And then the woman is left like, disconnected. Like, I really wanted to like reflect on this experience and learn with my partner. That's a really important. So like, as a guy, not only is it like starting to practice to engage your wife emotionally or your girls emotionally, but if you have your own emotions, which everyone does, start getting into the habit of taking time to like ask yourself personal questions about like, why am I feeling anxious? I'm feeling anxiety. What does this emotion mean that I need? Some of the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Using your relationship as like a mirror of how you're treating yourself. That's really cool that you can see that so clearly.
I've been forced to, I think, because of my job. Because like people, when they come in for couples therapy, they naturally just start pointing the finger at the other person and like, they need to change this, they need to change that. And I feel like a big part of my job is like, well, what about you? There's a reason you're reacting this way emotionally. It has to do with how you're reacting to your own emotions, you know? So that's why, I mean, if you think about it, it's like we bring ourselves into any relationship. So wherever we're at, we bring that into the relationship. And so the quality of all of our relationships with other people is very dependent on the relationship with our own self and how we are dealing with our own emotions.
I love the idea, just pinning it down to yourself, that anything you bring, you're bringing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the good parts of you, but you're bringing the good and the bad to every relationship you encounter. I really love that idea. If you think of it that way, I think that's digestible. As a man, I understand that clicks for me, that I can use that as a mirror. I think that's a struggle sometimes for men, is seeing themselves, like seeing how it all connects, their emotions and their actions, and that they're not separate, that they're connected in everything you do. I think that's really hard sometimes to notice, because it's so easy to just flip a switch and just go and do and turn off everything else.
Exactly. Yeah, we live in a day where it's not like the old days. It's not like, I obviously think about the ancestors of our land, the Native Americans. It's not back similar to then, where it's like the men woke up in the morning and then they just hunted all day under the masculine sun, and then they retreated to their tent and rested and provided food. And the women were stoked about it. They were totally fine with that. And then the women, when the moon would come out and the night would begin, they would go out and do their spiritual practices, whatever. We live in a time where it's like all of us are both the sun and the moon. All of us are both the masculine and the feminine. And so if you're not channeling or trying to connect or channel both of those within yourself, you're going to have strained relationships or surface relationships.
Is there ever a time where like you're supposed to be a little more of one, or is your goal?
Oh, for sure.
Constant balance, like perfect yin yang type thing.
If a man is taking on the responsibility of a financial provider, like he has to channel the masculine when he wakes up and goes to work and, you know, I don't know, closing business deals or whatever.
Bread or whatever, you know, however they.
Yeah. But then having the range to come home and like really connect with his kids and have these meaningful conversations with his wife, you know, wow. Like that to me is what it means to be a man, is to have the range. I'm not limited to just making money.
Right. There's more to me than the work I do.
And this is what women want. Any woman that wants any type of like meaningful connection with their husband wants the man to have the range. And most men don't. But what I find really cool is that anyone is capable of developing that way. And so this is one of the other misconceptions that people have about relationships is
100%.
This is just who I am. I'm just not an emotional person. That's not me.
You hear that all the time.
That's not me. So woman, you just need to get used to this, because that's not who I am. That is not true. That's what you think. That's not actually what the truth is.
It's hogwash.
It's a bunch of hogwash.
Yeah.
100%.
Because everyone is both masculine and feminine.
100%. My biggest question is for a man, how do you help your woman feed her masculine side? Oh, what are options for that? What are healthy ways of doing that?
I don't think you want to try to do that.
You don't? I don't know.
I don't think anyone likes the feeling that they're getting like trained.
No,
by
if they've asked.
I don't know. I don't think if they ask,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So as a man, how can I help a woman be more masculine? Let's first talk about maybe some of the gaps
Okay.
for women.
Mm-hmm.
Feminine is their natural way, but they struggle with developing the masculine in the relationship.
What can that look like?
It's a great question. It looks like many things, but the biggest thing that I've seen is what women have a hard time understanding, or having a hard time implementing is a better word to say it, is what most men really want to know when there's conflict or when there's a problem is like, are we good?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Like, they almost need to know that we're good. And then what do you want me to do? But what women have the tendency to do is when there's conflict, they have a tendency to step into their feminine. And so what that looks like is they then go on expressing themselves about how they feel about all this stuff. You don't care about me. This is why you don't care about me. Da, 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 da. And that's fine, but they have a really hard time channeling their emotional expression to some kind of practical like feedback.
Like, what can I do about it?
Exactly.
Right. How do we fix that?
So what does it mean to channel the masculine in a relationship? It means to be able to communicate clearly about what the problem is and what you want to change. That is a lot more difficult for women, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where women cause a lot of their own frustration because they're really upset at their husband for not listening to them. But when you are opening up and expressing a lot of emotional language, a man on average has an ability to take in about 30 seconds of that. And he tunes out. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's biological, but it's very normal.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sucks for you, the woman, because then you don't feel heard. You don't feel seen. You don't feel understood. So there's nothing wrong with expressing yourself emotionally. You just want to make sure that you're seeking a solution and you're gearing it towards. Otherwise, that's the biggest thing. There's many things, but that's probably one of the biggest things that I see.
From personal experience, like as the guy in that situation,
I'm describing the perfect story of my marriage, by the way.
I think this is really common then. I really think
my wife has gotten so much better, and I feel like hopefully I have as well. But yeah, man.
It's definitely a process, but with me and Ashlyn, it's like sometimes when she's expressing herself emotionally, it makes me feel when I don't know if we're good or not. Like the number one is, are we good? And then what can I do about it? That makes me feel like maybe we aren't good because it's just going and going and building and it isn't getting anywhere. And so that for me, sometimes I'm like, I come to the assumption that like, holy crap, maybe she's really mad at me, or like maybe she's really hurt by me, something I did. Like she seems pretty deeply, affected by this. And it's something that we have worked on as a team together to come to better communication, to let me know, hey, we're all good, but let me vent for a second because this is something that's bothering me.
You hit the nail on the head. So what's the practical feedback on what women can do? Honestly, most women are pretty amazing and they've got all the important things kind of dialed in. But what is difficult is the masculine communication. So the practical feedback of that is like, if you need to vent, that is totally fine. You want your husband or your partner to listen, that is totally fine. Try to tell them that though, like, hey, I just need to vent for 5 minutes and I just want you to listen. And then the guy's like, he's
totally okay.
He's like, she's telling me what I need to do. I get it, women. You want the guy just to know.
Yeah.
Women just want the guy to know without having to tell him. But guys just don't know. They don't.
We want to really bad.
They're not as emotionally in tune as you are. and I empathize with you. It's very it can be frustrating, and it feels like, oh, that's unfair. I have to tell him. It doesn't matter if you have to tell him, as long as you're getting what then it's great. You won't be upset if you tell your husband to listen and he listens really well afterwards. You'll feel good.
Mm-hmm.
So the preface. So I just need to vet for a little bit, and then hey, like. Basically just the more direct communication as the human race begins to avoid emotion more and to discount it more and to listen to emotions less.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening is both men and women are becoming more masculine. It's a big problem.
It's kind of a dangerous direction to be heading in.
Because why is that a big problem culturally and universally? Well, because that means that more and more relationships are having less depth. More and more relationships are having a less of an emotional connection, less of a spiritual importance to them.
Mm-hmm.
As the masculine develops more and more and becomes imbalanced, the empathy begins to go down. People's hearts fail them. In Christian teachings, this is one of the predictors in the Bible. This is one of the predictors of the apocalypse, of the end of days.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about how people's hearts will wax cold and they will forget. So we see this happening in the world of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So the man his responsibility is to be a leader in your relationship. And the best way to do that is to listen to your emotions and take more time to do that.
I love that. I think that
it's becoming a big problem. I've never seen more masculine men,
mm-hmm.
and the demasculation of men too.
At the same,
it's a huge polar. We'll maybe talk more about
yeah.
that. But then women are becoming a lot more masculine.
Mm-hmm. I think that topic, just that in that light, that's something that most people haven't heard of or thought about before, that there's a balance of energies, and that you need to be more aware of the balance going on inside of yourself. You want to make a bigger impact, fix the balance inside of yourself first.
So like, what does it mean to be a man? And what does it mean to be a woman? The number one quality on both of those answers to both those questions. What does it really mean to be a man? It means to be teachable and to be able to seek feedback
mm-hmm.
and to receive it. I also believe that's one of the core elements of what it means to be a woman, to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
But especially for men, because that seems like we've talked about, that seems to come a little bit more naturally for women, you know?
Mm-hmm.
My heart goes out to a lot of the women that I see in therapy, because I more often see an unwillingness. It's not that imbalance. It's slightly more men are just not willing to be open emotionally. And it's just so sad, man.
Yeah.
You have this amazing person that just wants to be loved, that just wants to connect.
It's the saddest thing, because if the man knew what he was missing out on, he would change. He would change. If he was able to see what was on the end of that journey of having an emotional openness with their partner, most of the time they can't fathom that. They don't even believe it if they hear it. I just think of my dad, or maybe even more my grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and just that wasn't even a thought that was going to be entertained. They just couldn't believe that was who they were, or that was possible for them to feel that, and there was no motivation behind it either. If they knew the blessings that could come from that, how amazing these women are and what they could give you in your life, I'm sure that they would turn around pretty quick. And it's just sad that sometimes they can't see what they're missing out on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I couldn't agree with you more. Dane, any thoughts, man? Questions?
It's awesome that you can just like sense an inhale of a comment. Yeah, I was going to say, or I was going to ask, like, do you think it's partially a fear of giving up on whatever traits of their masculinity, like they're holding on to? Do you sense that with your clients, that there's like that there's like a fear of losing something by
for sure.
embracing more of the feminine approach to conversation?
That's such a beautiful question, man. Men are so much more afraid of rejection than they will be willing to be honest about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are they afraid of? Right.
They're afraid of rejection, and it comes from two sides. Like, what if there's many reasons why, but these are two big ones I've noticed. This fear of, if I become more vulnerable or emotional, you could say, what if it's still not enough? The rejection of that is going to hurt more.
Yeah.
So the masculine energy is the masculine energy is to protect. Well, you're not really protecting your relationship. You're protecting yourself because you're afraid to get hurt. So, and then on the other side, to some degree, it's like, well, if I develop this is less common, but I think it's very real. If I develop this way, then my bros or the homies,
will think less of me or something.
It's not what men do. There's a bunch of cultural. It's not even real, but there's a bunch of perceived cultural pressure.
It's a bunch of misconceptions.
Yes, myths, conceptions.
That's exactly right.
Myths and misconceptions. But what's really fascinating about this part, and then we should switch topics, is that this whole, like, men are very afraid of rejection. They just won't open up about it that much with women, but also with other men in their group. Because this isn't like the 1950s after the war, when, more rural cultures in America, where if you grew up as a boy, your grandpa was living there with you guys and your dad, and you guys were all like working on the farm together. And after World War II is when the industry started. So it was actually probably more pre-World War II. But regardless, like, men were experiencing boys growing up were experiencing a bunch of male bonding in their tribe. And so they naturally developed, it sounds weird, but if we get more of a masculine, healthy connection growing up, meaning we feel support from our dad or other men, then we feel more comfortable being more feminine and having a better balance with that. Basically, we feel more comfortable stepping into that. But if I didn't get this male connection, then I am unconsciously seeking approval, and the opposite of approval is rejection, and I'm really afraid of rejection. Okay. So we see this a lot in the African American communities, where there's a very high percentage of African American boys that grow up without a dad. I think it's like 70%.
Very large number.
Unfortunately. So what do these boys do? Well, they don't, obviously it makes sense. They don't have a male role model, really. So they seek approval and that connection in gangs or whatever. Obviously not all of them, but it's sad. It's a sad kind of thing. But just to go back, so I have this male bonding growing up, and I feel more comfortable stepping into the feminine. But if I didn't have that, then I just don't want to lose these guy friends I have, even if they're not healthy, even if they're like the unhealthy masculine and they, the bros that just don't treat people that great or whatever, the bravado and the ego.
Yeah.
I see men really afraid of losing that too, experiencing rejection on that front. So
it's a tough spot.
Obviously the right answer is choosing to be more emotional yourself, and maybe starting to go to therapy, maybe starting to just be interested in that avenue more and start to learn more about yourself and what you need and what you're feeling and what it means. And that's a good place to start.
I always think of the quote that says it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Gardener in wartime.
Oh yeah.
That quote I think about because there's so much symbolism behind that. What would a warrior in a garden look like versus a gardener in a war? And a warrior in a garden is someone who's chosen a specific type of life after they've seen what the real world is like, or they've built the skills that the men would have, and then they choose the life that they want from that. I think that that's just so powerful, is to reframe your mind. Yeah, you've been taught these things your whole life. Yeah, you've been around them your whole life, and you've developed those skills and those things, but there is a way to choose a better life. And just the peace and serenity that comes from a gardener's lifestyle, that choice is just, I don't know. I always think that for myself is like, that's what a real man would be, is strong enough to choose for himself.
Yeah, this whole idea that like emotion makes you weak. I love, we were talking about the symbolism of this, at least I referenced it. I love the symbolism of a tree in this regard, where it is said that in order for a tree to grow to heaven, that its roots have to reach deeper down towards hell. In other words, that really what growth and strength is deepening your roots, is being able to choose to go deeper within yourself, which is an emotional and a spiritual decision. That is where true strength comes from. Because think about it. How does that make sense? Why does that actually make someone stronger?
Growing deeper roots or looking further into yourself. How does that make you stronger?
I guess the question is like, is it really going to make me stronger as a man or a woman if I start looking at my emotions more and starting to try to listen to them and understand them? Is that, and also spiritually, is that really going to make me stronger? I have doubts about that.
I think if you were a tree, you wouldn't feel very confident in growing very tall if your roots weren't going to stable enough to hold you. I think you would know if you had legs to stand on to grow and to be confident. Let's say symbolism, right? If the tree is going to grow taller, it needs. I don't think. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that the tree would reach higher heights if its roots didn't get deeper.
Well, it could try, but it would blow. It would become.
It would feel the shakiness of the decision it just made. It would know and be unsure. And I don't think you can have confidence without doing that. You can't confidently stretch in life without having deeper roots of who you are and that you can handle it.
What almost everyone wants is emotional control, and being in control of your emotions is not just managing them, but it's listening to these deeper messages from your true self. That's what these are. And so it's one of those things where it's like, the reason why doesn't everyone just choose that more naturally? Well, they don't know that emotions are a messenger with a message. And the truth is to grow deeper roots and to grow towards that direction is to some degree growing towards hell. Things become worse in ways temporarily. I mean, think about it. Think about this man that has 10 years of emotional baggage or that he's never dealt with. And he makes this decision to start dealing with it. He's going to be limited in other areas. Like he's going to have anxiety start coming up, maybe a little bit more, sadness, bunch of stuff. It's hard.
Yeah.
But it's the only way to achieve, if you avoid it, then the emotions will come up when you don't want them to. And I think that's a powerful message, is how do I actually gain emotional control? It's a consistent decision to go toward the emotion and to try to understand it rather than to run away from it.
okay, we've stated the facts that most men have a hard time connecting emotionally, whether with other people or themselves. And we talked about that fear. So like, what are some ways that you overcome those fears or those things that are preventing you as a man? Like, are there any things that you can do in order to overcome that? If it doesn't come naturally,
Yeah. A root of that fear is going to be you lacking understanding, is going to be you not seeing things for the way that they really are. And so a willingness, so we talked about how anxiety and fear is literally our body trying to tell us that the way that I'm viewing a situation or life isn't based in truth or the reality of how things really are. And so Dane, it has to start with like an openness to learn things a little differently, and starting to listen to podcasts, starting to read books, starting to go to therapy, whatever that starting point is. And then from there, the natural first step is I need to start having some kind of an emotional check-in.
Mm-hmm.
And that emotional check-in is, what am I feeling? And then what does this emotion actually mean that I need to do? And we're going to be blasting this emotional guide so that you can, if you're at that point, you can have a starting point to really start looking at this. And it's really tough to do alone. You really, depending on your situation, you really do need like a guide if you really want to get serious about this. And so finding a therapist that is, because we would love to do that through this podcast, but it's pretty individual.
Mm-hmm.
We do our best to share, some of the practical application for sure, but you really need like a personal guide. And what's cool, Dane, about you is today on this pod, people are going to see that process start unfolding for you, because we're going to do that with you if you're down.
right.
Dane's going to be the guinea pig for everybody.
Little did you know.
Strap in.
So we're going to dive into that in just a second. Yeah. So before we switch over to Dane, I feel like we got to follow up with you on your purpose a little bit. And we were just talking before this. Is there anything that really stuck out to when we were talking before the podcast about where you're at right now and what's important for you as you enter into this new phase of, I've let go of all my pain and now I'm entering into more finding purpose and fulfillment? Is there anything that kind of really stuck out to you?
Definitely. Two things really stuck out to me. One was we in the conversation talking about purity, talking about purifying myself of things in my life that may be slowing me down or just getting in the way. It's something that I think about all the time. And whether that's bad food habits or bad sleep habits or
And for a lot of men, it's like sexual stuff. I'm not saying it is for you, but for a lot of men, it's any sexual slip-ups or whatever.
But those kinds of, that like really stuck out to me because it's something that I've been feeling personally. Like, you need to clean it up, man. Like, you know what you need to do, and I've just been kind of stagnant on it. And it was like, that's exactly what it is. It's the purity. It's that feeling, that responsibility. Like, I'm a vessel for good if I'm clean enough for that. If I'm in, well, it's not really even that. It's because it's not so much about that. It's like good, better, best. If I want to be my own expectation of myself, then I have to be pure in order to do that.
That's been heavy on my mind too, man, lately. I think the hard thing about purity or about improving just generally is that I really like the Buddhist teaching that basically says something along the lines of like, if you could really see your spirit, if you could really see your unconscious for what it was, you would realize that you were already there. Basically implying that like this deeper part of us, this spirit, this consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is very pure and full of light. And what's so difficult for us to see is when we give into the physical pleasures, food, sex, money, when those start to become, maybe bad habits for us. What literally is happening is this light that is within us starts to dim. Even little things, because our spirit, our unconscious is so sensitive. It's so pure, right? What would happen if people could see this? Like, oh, my light was at 85%, but now it's down to 83 because of how I was talking about this girl.
Gosh, that would be like shocking to see that all the time.
I slipped up, and, looked at pornography or whatever. Like, or as a woman, I was very critical towards somebody else. And, that brought some of my light down. Now, what does this even mean? Or what's the significance of this? Well, light is how we see. Light, the more light within us allows us to see other people more for who they really are. More light within us allows us to see for who we really are. See us for who we really are. Allows us to see everything that matters on a deeper level. Okay, so it really matters, and it's okay if you've lost light. You can gain it back and grow that way. The only thing in Buddhism that I don't think I agree with is this idea that like you're full of light and that's just there. And basically in Buddhism, they're like, it's just who you are. And it's like how you always will be. They don't give much room that you can actually
affect it.
It's just, grow. That light can grow. So anyways, that's had a big impact on me, is understanding like my own, when I'm alone and when I mess up doing whatever or whatever, I'm distracted, whatever purity things, it affects me way more than I realize. And if I can view that without feeling shame and just like see it, it's been very motivating for me to be more, just to be better.
Just making it like real. Because imagining it.
I see the impact. Like I've seen the impact that it has on my ability to show up for other people and of my connection spiritually. It literally is like kind of a lower frequency and a lower energy that like I notice dip. And I don't like that. I can't stand that personally.
I'm a very like image-based, like illustrations is how I put things together in my head. And I think that's I think that's a good starting point for me, is to try and gauge, checking in with, because I'm already doing that. It's just looking what to look for. And I think that's one that I really can use.
How good do you feel like you are at like a weekly kind of like focus, like I guess weekly goals?
That's a tough question. I feel like I should be setting more goals, because I'm already because it's not that hard right now. So I'm like, maybe I'm not doing much of anything. If I'm achieving these pretty easily, then maybe I'm not raising the bar high enough for myself. Because I don't think that I'm having much of a struggle, like from start of the week to the end of the week, just doing the same things that I set a goal out to do and continue doing. I'm doing pretty good at that. I just don't feel like I'm adding enough to that. I just feel like there's space. I'm like, what do I do?
I feel like the core of my practice is every Sunday, once a week, I will ask myself the question, what is the most important thing for me to work on this week? what's the top one or two most important things? There's no question that I have experienced that gets answered quicker than that question. It is the law of nature, and in all things is growth and progression. You will see it in anything that is pure. The trees are constantly growing, the grass, the river is flowing, it's heading somewhere, it's good, it's on a mission. You know, so we are like that too at our pure core. So anyways, I think that could be something like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll seek that through prayer. Sometimes I'll seek that through nature. Sometimes, you know, when I go to church, something will stick out. You know, I kind of mix it up on what avenue I want to seek that question through. And I really try to listen. And then something always emerges. And it's cool because then you know it's not just a guess. And I think that's what's hard for people. Why do some people not progress quicker? They're doing guesswork. It's like, are you sure that's what you really need? Or are you just guessing? You're just throwing darts in the dark on a board and hoping that it hits.
Yeah. I feel like I get too complacent just doing that. Even knowing that I'm doing that, I think that I get like complacent with that. I definitely want to work on that. And I feel like it kind of ties into the other thing that we were talking about, like finding my gifts, like finding those things. I think there's no quicker way to find and exercise what those gifts are than by doing that, than asking every week, checking in and being like, so what do I focus on this time? I'm sure that if those are things that God wants me to focus on now, those are probably going to be some of the things that he tells me I need to focus on during the week. And I just got to keep that door open.
And you're so connected, man. Like, you'll know. And
you ever get like afraid to know sometimes? Because honestly, like sometimes I'm like, I feel like it's a big thing. Like I don't know. And I'm like, I'm kind of worried about I'm kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, all right, let me have it.
I feel like that's your past self. There's often, I wouldn't say bad news, but there's often like, dude, like, you really got to step it up in this. It was harder for you in the past to step it up because you had this emotional weight weighing you down. You were probably pretty hard on you. I know you've had a tendency to be hard on yourself. So it's like you were carrying around this emotional weight. And we were talking about the sadness from your dad was also kind of weighing you down a little bit and affecting maybe some of your energy or motivation to like get a job and to, because you just moved here and there's a transition and all this stuff. So the emotional weight is gone. Whatever you want to do, nothing is going to be able to hold you back other than thoughts. Emotions will not be a factor anymore from your past. It's like a clean slate.
That's crazy because I can feel that. And that's what's crazy about
that. And you haven't, you're still kind of like, this just kind of fully happened like a couple weeks ago.
And I think along those lines, man, the last thing that really stuck out in that conversation was giving credit to myself as well. That one really hit home for me. I think I hide behind that. I'm really good at being grateful. But sometimes I have a hard time giving myself that credit, that I was even a part of it, or that it was even me that was in the room saying those words. Like, sometimes I don't know. I feel like I definitely need to be honest about that.
That is so well said, man. It's cool to see how much that means to you, because that's all it is being honest. We're not talking about taking more credit than is you, but we're not talking about discounting your role either. It's just there's a balance. Being honest. I think that's a fear for some people. It's like, that's a fear for me.
Me too.
I don't want to, me and Kimberly were talking about this. Like, I don't want to develop this
ego.
Yes.
Never. I'm
sure it's already there and I don't even realize it.
No, it's not. It's not.
But that's what it means not to be a man, is to have this ego and to feel like I'm better than other people, or that I'm like I'm changing people.
Yeah. I'm the
the
special
reason.
thing.
I want to.
Makes me so uncomfortable, dude.
We are good homies.
Mm-hmm.
We will keep each other in check. We need good people to kind of. This is why we need our wives or our.
They check us.
Trust me. Why my wife doesn't think I'm that. She doesn't. She doesn't even really like me. And I need that. I need that like
reality.
Yeah, man, I need that. I need that like challenger. That it's important. I've honestly that is the thing I've been the most grateful for. It sounds so weird, but that's the thing I've been the most grateful for my wife, because like I love my job. I feel like my role is really important, and I love learning from people and with people, and it's like I don't ever let this. I don't need this validation, and I don't ever let this sink in. But I think people think I'm great, and I believe I'm great, but my wife doesn't. And that's not, it sounds weird, but it's helped me so much to, I'm sure she does. I'm sure if we asked her, she'd be like, no, yeah, whatever. I do. You're great. I love you. But, yeah, but just like, we need that, what is it? It's just the archetype of, I can't remember the term. Just the challenger, the opposition or whatever.
Like the devil's advocate. In this situation or whatever. Yeah. There's a lot of people rooting for me, and a lot of people tell me things about myself, and I'm like, thanks. Like, I hope I live up to that. And that's kind of like in my head how I feel about it. It's just really hard sometimes to believe what they believe in me without having that conflict of thought. Like, I really don't want to be that ego guy, and like, I really don't want to be that personality. I really don't want to grow any of those muscles. And like accepting what someone's telling you about yourself that they've felt from you or something, and not letting I don't know. I just have a fear of the ego growing. And
for sure.
I don't know.
I think any grounded, genuinely good human being should have that fear, or does have that fear, I believe. If you don't, then the ego is already
you're maybe already
taken over the
exactly. Yeah.
But one of the things that's worth saying, I think a question that I think is worth asking is, so how do I have this balance of not developing pride or not developing an ego? How can I give myself credit, or I want to feel confident, but I don't want to be egotistical? How do I do that?
I've heard that confidence is just being honest about what you're capable of.
That's the truth.
Okay.
How could we argue with that? It's totally the truth. And I feel like what is important, I think the physical body is going to gradually go towards ego. It's within us physically. So we have to actively be doing something to stop that development. And we have to get active. The antithesis of the ego is being a student, because the ego believes they're the teacher.
I see what you're saying.
So you have to actively continue to put yourself in the role as a student, which means this is why we've talked so much about taking personal time for yourself. And during that personal time, you are trying to read something of value. You're trying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's a act of, I don't know everything, ego.
Mm-hmm.
I need to learn. So that habit over time really can help keep the ego check. And then obviously what we've been talking about with like learning from our own emotions and reflection,
Mm-hmm.
genuine improvement, reflection emotionally.
Well, that's like
Is another way.
humility.
Exactly.
That's a form that it's like humility in action.
We're talking about humility, but
Mm-hmm.
how do the answer is humility. And we just broke down what that would look like basically.
Yeah.
I heard this and it reminded me of what we were talking about. So in World War II, in one of the villages, there was a statue of Christ, and the village got bombed, and the statue of Christ was in rubble. And so after the war, the villagers started to put all the pieces back together, and they were able to put all of the pieces back together except the hands.
Wow.
They were able to find all these little pieces, and I think they put some, I think they
Filled some
repaired.
spaces.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With marble or whatever. And so it was kind of a topic in the village, like, should we got to repair the hands. And then people were like, basically the village made the decision, like, no, let's leave it how it is, as a reminder of the quote underneath the statue. And in quotes, it says, "You are my hands." I think that's such a powerful visual. Again, if you believe in God or Jesus, cool. If you want to view this more as a symbol, but there's a real force out there for good. They could have hands if they wanted to, but they choose not to because they are interested in our progression. So you and your purpose, you are his hands. He cannot do it without you. And all of us have a really important purpose to discover. And I'm not worried about you at all. You are on the path. It is going to be more important for you soon, I believe, to know more specifically what your greater purpose is, like in the next couple of years, and what that looks like, and how you need to be preparing and all that stuff. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for years. It seems like I don't know. I guess that's why we started this podcast as a part of it. So cool. But yeah, I love that visual.
I'm going to have to take some time to think about that, because there's so much depth to that phrase. Because everybody knows Christ's hands healed people, they helped people, they built things. Before his ministry, they worked hard. Those hands knew how to farm and fish and read the constellations, and then those hands were pierced on like a cross.
Wow.
There's a lot there.
There is. So not only are we meant to listen to this guiding influence and to obey it, you could say, but we're also meant to feel pain. So these roots can become stronger, and the tree can grow taller. Now, what also is cool about the root thing is roots have to grow deeper before they can grow out. And when roots begin to grow out, there's a smaller tree not too far away that doesn't have as much light. And that roots are small and weak. And naturally, where those roots go is they go towards that tree or that person with not as much light, and they connect to the roots, literally providing it nourishment and strength and supporting it. That is the natural purpose for all of us is to use our gifts and talents to begin to grow roots outward.
But you have to go deep before you go save anyone else. I love that.
Is that just the big message today,
That's
man?
so cool.
We're just preaching depth today.
Depth.
And it's time to go deep with Dane, I think. Okay, so Dane, what's cool about Dane is his journey that we're going to go on with him is going to be a really good archetype, a really good example of probably some of the questions you would want to ask yourself and some of the practices that you will want to also do to become more emotionally aware and to start knowing what you need. And so it'll be cool to go through this. So we started a little bit. We did session 1.
Sort of, yeah. Like, what was that? Like 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
A little mini session 1 last time. So remind the audience again, like what's like the main 1 or 2 things that you really want to see improve for you?
It would be probably focus is one of them. I've also thought a lot about like, it's like the focus, distraction type thing. What was the one thing we were talking about? I wish I can remember.
We were talking
what
about,
was another yeah, go ahead.
We were talking about focus for you. And then the other thing was we were talking about like generally your self-worth and wanting to feel generally just better about who you are and not have like these judgments of other people affect you.
I might want to change that if you don't mind. The one about self-worth, I don't know that is as big I'm always willing to admit that maybe I can improve there. I think everyone has a little demon inside that's saying like you're worthless, whether you're good at like putting him in the back seat, whatever you do with that.
Yeah.
I almost think of it like when I give people the definition of like imposter syndrome, I tell them it's like, well, imposter syndrome doesn't really ever go away. It's like, you get really good at managing it and you kind of give it, it sits further back in the bus. You know what I mean? And it doesn't direct the driving as much. And it doesn't seep into your decisions and your emotions, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Anyway, so I almost want to say, for me, I've been digging a little deeper, just thinking about it over the last like few days. I have a deep fear of change, and I think it comes from my dad, for sure. Or like a deep fear, like you talked about, like your direction and your path a lot, Ernest, and I've always kind of let things happen to me rather than feeling like I have like complete control over my future. You know what I mean? And so I've I can own up to the fact that I've worked very hard to be where I am, which is to have a career that I love. Like I have my dream job, like truthfully, it doesn't pay as much as I'd like it to. There's a lot of upside potential and all this stuff because I'm a part owner in the business. And anyway, I feel like still I would like to take control over.
That's what you were talking about last time. It's all coming back. So I really would like this challenge of like focusing has like been a part of my life for a long time, maybe forever.
Yeah. And
I also want to just feel more confident in my career, in my assertiveness.
There it was.
Assertiveness.
Yeah, it's like asserting myself to make my own decisions for my path. You know what I mean? Rather than just being like, okay, I'll do that. I'm taking directions. I'm used to taking directions from people or taking directives rather than like making things happen. Like I want to be more of the type of person that will make things happen and forge ahead or like forge my own path.
Cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what's interesting about assertiveness, it's going to be kind of like in the vein of confidence / self-worth.
Yeah.
So let's just
Right.
call it assertiveness and focus. Cool.
And then I have OCD stuff that at some point we could talk about that I would love to get over. that's another day maybe.
There's going to be a lot of overlap with all of these things, the focus, the OCD, and the assertiveness. But just for a matter of like this conversation, what's one of those things right now? What's one, like, what do you want to start seeing improve right now the most?
Maybe the fact that I'm not able to focus in on one thing right now tells me we should talk about focus.
Okay.
Good deal.
So one of the cool things that I mentioned, I think me and Ernest mentioned in passing as we were leaving, was I think I mentioned this statement of like, focus is a lot more emotionally rooted than people think.
It's very interesting. Tell me more.
Well, what was cool about how you responded is Ernest actually commented on this. Like, did you see like the hope on Dane's face when you said that? I was like, I kind of didn't because I wasn't actually paying attention. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was so cool. So before we dive into that, it's worth asking you like, okay, one of the things that you want to just try to be okay with, at least for now, believing is that, and I think you already do, is focus is not a part of who you are. It's not like some characteristic that is a part of who you are. It has felt that way, but the lack of focus, the inability to focus has been a symptom of something underneath it. Inability to focus, OCD, it's always a symptom. No one is ever born with OCD. No one is ever born with the trait of inability to focus. It is something that develops because of of many things. So the first question is we can just talk about the focus thing. What is your theory on what is like the root?
It's a great question.
Cause of your challenge with focusing?
Yeah, it's a great question because I've actually thought about this a lot and I've had discussions with, there's a gentleman that is in close proximity to where we live that he's kind of known as like a healer, like a really holistic healer. And he deals with a lot of these conversations. And I remember telling him that there's just constant thoughts bombarding me. Like whether they're good or bad or I'm just like constantly thinking, I think I mentioned to you, Ernest, that there's like this constant existential like dwelling. You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's kind of like where the spaciness conversation comes into play. As it's like, I'm just preoccupied with thoughts always. And I have to make a very conscious effort to be like, okay, Dane, now's not the time to think about the cosmos. I'm just joking around. There's
yeah,
you know,
it could be whatever.
It could be whatever. It's like thoughts come in and out all the time. And I'm not saying they're good, bad. They're just thoughts.
Okay.
Anyway, then there's a lot of conversation that we had earlier on about thoughts, which is interesting. But I need to like create room for now more often.
We're going to talk a little bit about like helping you manage, or if you might already be really good at managing some of these thoughts, but just to kind of give you a glimpse of where we're probably going to go is how do emotions impact our ability to manage thoughts? How do emotions impact thoughts? This is something that's not talked about enough and not understood. Basically, what happens is most of us have past pain from our upbringing that's already taking up some space. Now, let's say you have some stress come up with work or some, let's say your wife is critical of you in some way and you feel bothered by that to some degree. Just normal negative emotions. What's interesting is if you don't know what to do with those, if you don't know what they mean, which most of us don't, then what we'll naturally do is we'll naturally like push them aside. So now what happens is that these negative feelings are actually stored in our body. So that might be, so I'll finish explaining this and I'll ask you a question. So as emotion, so what are emotions? Emotions are actual energy. And if we don't know the exact message that these emotions are trying to tell us, then they are stored in our body. Okay, what happens then? Well, this energy has to go somewhere.
Sure.
And so where does it go?
Thoughts often.
It goes up. It creates more
Like turbulence up there.
Yep.
Or not even turbulence, but just busy.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. So people always focus like, okay, I have an inability to focus, I have OCD. I just need to like figure out how to manage my thoughts. That is an important part of the process. But what we'll eventually do is we will look at what emotionally do you need to do? What emotionally do you need to look at? If you let go of that, if you work through that, if you are getting some emotional consistency, your ability to focus, you don't have two enemies anymore. You will only have one, which is just the thoughts.
Say that again. You won't have two enemies.
One of the enemies is underlying emotions.
Gotcha.
And the other one is obviously thoughts that are coming in.
That's the same process as like someone who's really stressed out and then they don't think about it all day. And when they go to bed, they can't sleep because they got all these thoughts rolling around in their head. Like, man, I got to solve some of this stuff before I go to sleep. They get like a second wind.
Right.
They think.
Yep.
But isn't that the same thing? Similar?
Very similar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Emotions create energy within us that manifests itself through overthinking and a lot of thoughts. And so
it's like they don't have to be of any type, right?
Nope.
Like they don't have to be positive or negative.
Well, they're going to be negative.
Then the emotions are. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Not talking about the thoughts then. We're talking about the emotions.
The emotions are going to be negative. Yeah.
Gotcha. And that's okay. And that's what will cause the busyness.
Yep.
Upstairs.
Yeah, the energy is stored in your body. It has to.
So how do we find out the root of these emotions?
Good question.
I think you, with how deep you are and how much you think about the cosmos, I think you're going to have a good, I don't think there's going to be any huge surprises.
Yeah. Right.
It's not like you were
It'll be
secretly,
like,
it's not like you were secretly abused when you were 10 by, whoever.
Right.
That could emerge. And if it does, we'll just like not air it. Just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
But no, dude, it's going to be like stuff that you probably already know, but we just are going to take a closer look at it. Do you want to get a good idea of most likely what that is right now?
Sure. That's where this should go. Yeah.
Okay. And then we should talk about helping you make sure you have a really solid practice with like managing some of your thoughts.
Cool.
That'll be the first step. You have to start from the top down physiologically. The top down, I have to start with my head, managing my thoughts, and then go deeper, which is emotions and spirit. And we'll incorporate that. But I'm going to ask you I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to help you put some pieces together.
Let's do it.
This is cool. It's cool doing this with like your homie.
I know.
And not like a client.
The reality is that Corey and I have had deep conversations many times, but this is a little bit more.
But never this like organized or
never this focused.
Directed. Yeah. It's cool.
Never with this much pressure on it. I'm just kidding. So let's talk about your parents first. So how comfortable, when you were growing up, how comfortable did you feel like opening up? Just normal teenage struggles. How comfortable did you feel opening up with like your mom and your dad?
I have a really healthy relationship with my parents. I've been very lucky for sure.
But specifically, when you were a teenager,
Yeah. How did I open up? Did I have trouble opening up to them? I don't think so.
do you remember
I don't
these
think so.
moments? Why don't we start with your mom?
Okay.
So normal teenage struggles that any teenage goes through. It's an emotional time. Do you remember these moments really struggling emotionally? Just normal stuff. And you would go to your mom and open up with her.
Yeah. I don't think I ever had a hard time opening up to her, opening up to my mom. Maybe more so my dad.
Really?
I don't know, man. I don't ever think it was a problem, but maybe maybe I don't even realize that there was a problem.
Well, we're not trying to create
Right.
something that isn't there.
I don't want to create something that's not there for sure. But it's
Yeah.
like, I literally am like, dude, I don't think that there is.
We're not.
I don't know.
The question isn't like, was there problems? And obviously, you're the only
I guess
one.
I'm searching for a problem.
Yeah, don't do that. Just like you do have emotions, and they would have been to some they would have to some degree come up strongly. I think the thing that's sticking out to me is like if you did have emotions and you struggled, just like any normal teenager does, you would remember if you could go to your mom and felt support and a connection. That is burned into your soul. So the fact that you, quote, don't know, or it's hard for me to remember, or I don't know if you said that, but I don't really know, is definitely an indication that you didn't perhaps
Fully
have like
that connection.
Yeah.
But I want to say that I did.
I know you want to say that you did.
But no, but like sincerely with that, I remember having many open conversations with my mom for sure, but about like emotions. I mean, it was just the typical anxiety of wanting to be, maybe accepted, fit in and whatnot. I don't know. I remember, just like trivial stuff, like you have your bullies, and I'd go to her about that. And I always felt very like, she would always just like root for me. It's like hardcore,
Oh, that's good. Cool.
Man, I feel like such a dud on this right now. I don't really know how to like, I don't know how to, I don't even know how to gauge it.
Well, don't put too much pressure on it for now. We're just kind of exploring it.
Yeah.
What about your dad?
Maybe I'm too logical about all this.
Well, we have to be a little bit logical. I mean, we're just, like, so let me preface it by saying this. Maybe it's like, whose responsibility is it to help a kid feel comfortable opening up and having good experiences opening up about struggles and emotions? It's obviously the parents' responsibility. Now, when we were growing up, all of us were growing up. We're all in our, Ernest is a little bit younger, but we're in our later 30s. It's like, it wasn't that common to have parents that were like, we need to emotionally support our kids. They need that. And we need to be really intentional about like asking them personal questions and noticing when their head is down and like engaging them. That was not a normal thing. But what we know now is that is absolutely like the basic need of an emotion of any teenager, male and female, is they need parents that are intentional in engaging them emotionally.
Yeah.
So it definitely sounds like there was this passiveness.
For sure.
At least with your mom and maybe even with your dad.
Well, for sure, like on my dad's side, it's like the very classic, you just kind of like deal with your stuff.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you just, and it wasn't like, so my dad is like, I look at my dad as like the most sensitive, patient, kind,
would go out of his way to serve other people kind of human being. But I don't know that necessarily equates with like
Right.
the emotional check-in that
Right.
kids need. Definitely more conversations with my mom emotionally than my dad.
Than your dad. Okay.
For sure.
That's good to know. Cool. That's all we need to know for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's all
easy.
That's all helpful.
Sorry, it took a lot of effort to get there.
That's good, man. That's really normal to like.
I literally look at my life and I'm like, I just had it so good. And maybe there's almost like a veil of like, I don't know, like if there was any errors on my parents' side that they're just completely gone. I don't know. Like you said, I don't want to try to conjure up something that's.
No, it'll be important to develop a little bit more depth to that. But just intellectually, what's just kind of interesting, maybe as a side note that we'll explore later, is, you know, me and her, we've talked about this a little bit, but anytime there is a emotional disconnect with the same sex parent, so you and your dad, it almost always affects assertiveness and confidence. Almost always.
Interesting.
And anytime there's a disconnect with the opposite sex, it almost always affects some relationship patterns with, obviously in this case, women. Just an interesting side note. We'll take a look at that more.
Yeah.
But I just want to promise you there is an answer that is going to make clear sense, and there is a reason why the focus in OCD, the lack of focus in OCD, has been there. And
I'm gonna put my trust in that.
Awesome. That's why you're in therapy, and you have no trust.
That's why your back's against the wall, and you're doing this no matter
That's
what.
why we ran out of guests today, and so we're cornering the tech guy.
It sounds to me when you were describing your thoughts, like, oh, my first thought was, man, that's tiring. If you have thoughts all the time, good or bad or non-objective, just thoughts, like,
yeah,
that's got to be tiring. And you've got responsibilities and people that you care about, and that's got to be hard. That's a challenge. And I just felt that from you when you were talking about it, that that's taxing on you, and you want to get rid of it. And I can see that, and that's cool.
Yeah, I want to get rid of that, and I want to get rid of like fear of failure to forge my own way and be assertive. You know what I mean? Whether that's fear of rejection, fear of it's like fear of I just want to like trust myself way more with being able to like just make decisions and not feel like I have to have this super clear. I feel like I never get clarity, like super hard. It's been very rare in my life where I get crazy clarity around like a direction to go. And so I'm left with this like, okay, here we go.
Yes.
I guess like this is just like, it feels like arbitrary, the direction.
That's so tough, man.
You know what I mean? Whereas like you have these moments with like God that are like, you know, I can tell you one time in my life where I felt very directed. And it was, I remember the time and place. I've made my basement, which is my studio, it's a very sacred place for me. It's where I've spent a lot of time on my knees. I'm a man of God. I'm a man of faith. And so prayer is huge. But I did have like you just need to get really like a very clear download. It was like one of the only times in my life. I think I told you this at one point, but it was like, you need to get really good at what you do. That was it. That was the only thing. And it was like right around the time, it was like close to when Qualtrics, I was working at Qualtrics. This was like maybe 6 months or less before they sold. And I had all these shares that vested, and I was able to go and do my thing full time. It hasn't always been smooth.
I wish you would have listened to that.
I
I'm
did.
just kidding.
Oh, dang. That was one of his.
I did.
He was
Dude.
just-
I did,
You were
Dad.
so- I
promise.
did that. That's what it is. It's your dad. No, I'm just kidding. Whoa, we just figured it out.
What do you mean I
No,
did?
dude. No, dude. You are so good at what you do, man. Obviously, we're always improving, but that's a really cool experience.
Yeah. Anyway. Sorry, I know I can go on tangents. Just redirect it if you need to.
No, that was.
But
I love that stuff.
what's cool about that is I want to actually ask you what I thought Ernest was going to ask you, which is why is this? Obviously, we're cornering the tech guy, but why is this so important for you to be able to focus better and for you to have more confidence?
Sorry, repeat the question. It was
The
why
question
it's
is
more why it's important.
why does this matter to you
Why does it matter
to improve in these ways?
survival? I guess like surviving in the world. It feels like survival for me all the time. Like I'm just like rather than thriving. Like I want to be able to. It's important to me because I want to be in a position of like thriving rather than like feeling like I'm hanging on.
Why does that
For dear
even? Why
life.
does that even matter?
What do you mean?
Why does that even matter to you?
It's fear of like
Why is it so important for you to be thriving and not just surviving?
freedom, just to not be so concerned about. Yeah, I think it's like security of your future. It's the fear of the unknown. You know.
Okay, so you're more free and you're more secure. Cool. Why does that even matter to you?
Why does that matter to me? Feels good. Feels good to feel secure and that affects my relationships, right? That affects.
What do you mean, right? You're the only one. You're the only one. It's this.
Am I right?
Yes, that's the correct answer. Well, I'm kind of grilling you.
Yeah, no, it's good.
A little bit because it's important for you to be in touch with like why I'm diving deeper and like why this actually does matter to me. And I know you.
Yeah.
And I know you care more about other people than you do yourself. You have always been an example to me of being selfless and being very generous and being very giving. And that is you. And so maybe there's no pressure but that's something I want you to think about for next time is like, maybe just take some time in your studio. Why is this so important to me?
I maybe overstep that side of not caring for myself enough or being too concerned about what other people are feeling or thinking rather than focusing, because that can bombard your thoughts too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Totally.
I'm going to invite, try to get emotional with that. I know there's an emotional answer there. I know there is. I know you. There's an emotional answer to that question. Of
why is it important?
Why is it so important for me for these things not to be burdens anymore?
For the lack of focus and assertiveness, all that stuff.
Why does it doesn't matter what it is. Why is it so important? Sure, those things. But why is it so why does it matter so much for me? We can tell it does. Me and Ernst can both tell it does. Why does it matter so much for me to improve my life specifically and to be more confident, to be able to focus more?
Frees up my thoughts of worry. You know, it frees up the worry, which frees up my emotions to be available for my family and all that good stuff. Like, I don't know.
You're obviously answering the question correctly. Here's the part of the invitation of the exercise is keep asking yourself why,
right,
until you get to something that you feel emotional about.
That's cool. Well, I'll have to think more about
So
that.
you can bring that in next time. That'll be cool that'll serve as a important emotional anchor as we get into things that are going to be hard. This isn't going to be like a breeze. It's hard to change patterns that have been there for 35 years.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you don't. It's so important. This is a good message. This is such a good message for anyone that really wants to change. Kind of like, what is your deeper why? What is your true emotional deeper why on why this is so important to you? I'll share one insight on that for you personally. And you kind of unconsciously said this, but I can't remember a time. I can only remember maybe one time where I had like clarity. And the thing with receiving inspiration creatively or spiritually, the mind has to be still. It has to be still. Anytime we receive any inspiration, it comes from a place of stillness. Now, sometimes the inspiration kind of like the inspiration comes in the form of like we almost feel the spirit or this inspiration come in the form of like, hey, this is important to be still right now. It almost is like, and then we're still for like a split second, and then something can sneak in real quick. Like, you need to get really good at what you do. And then the mind starts to get maybe busy after that. So,
right.
The goal with spiritual development is that I can create my own stillness. I don't need some external influence to open that door for me for a second or two to squeeze something in real quick. So what I'm trying to say is that I know a huge benefit for you is going to be, this is going to open up a new world of inspiration and creativity that is going to help you be, I believe, who you want to be, and especially in your work, more successful creatively.
For sure.
So that's going to be one of the benefits.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Stillness is a hard one for sure. Well,
it's been harder it's hard for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's been extra difficult for you because of some of these symptoms that we've started talking about.
Sometimes I'm pretty good at not thinking about anything. But it's not like an intentional stillness.
It's a numb.
Yeah, it's like a numb. It's just like,
well, that's part of the symptom. Yeah, that's part of the symptom of spaciness.
Yeah,
I'm not intentional.
Exactly.
When I'm not intentional, we're all of us
just drifting.
That's what it is. So
I think that's the summary for me. That's you. We just summed it up. I want to stop drifting. I feel like I've drifted a lot in my life, and that I've gotten luck, and so I attribute any success to luck too. And then it's like I keep feeling bad at myself because it's like, oh, you didn't do this. You just fell in your lap.
Yeah, you're not giving yourself the credit.
Yeah, you talked about that, Ernest. You talked about give yourself some credit. I have the hardest time with that. I have such a guilty conscience. The voice is like, you're just trash. That's like the voice deep down inside. You know what I mean? Like, you're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not like, that's like deep down. And so, like I said, I think I've developed some like thick skin with it because I've lived with it probably for a certain amount of time, but, and then there's events that have happened in my life that maybe I think reinforce that, you know what I mean? That belief.
I think a really cool visual, just going back to the whole like drifting thing, because I think any one of us can relate to that to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Is, to me, when I've noticed that in myself, the number one thing that drifting impacts is my relationships, because the visual is drifting is like being up in the clouds, just kind of floating around like in the clouds. But all of the grounding and meaningful connection happens on the earth.
Right.
This is where the feminine is. It's grounded. It is looking at each other in the eyes. It is connection. And drifting really takes over in some of those moments. And then we can't be, it's hard to be, basically, in other words, it's hard to be present in connection because the mind wants to stay in control.
Sorry to bring like medicine into this, but at what point is it like you just need to get yourself some like ADHD medicine? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know the difference, and it's wild for someone like me who's very self-aware. So I'll never forget my first encounter with like Vyvanse. Are you familiar?
Well, and you snorted it at first.
That was the first experience. It went straight into my bloodstream.
It's an
Just
epic
kidding.
It was an
introduction.
instant
Eye drops, right?
Yeah. But I had a really simple job at Qualtrics. And it was to make like 80 to 90 phone calls, inbound phone calls. Like it wasn't hard. This was during a time where I was like half my feet were like in the band that I was in. I was like pursuing music. Half was like, you got to provide for your family. So I'm like doing this job. Everyone kind of knew what my direction, you know, but I was good enough to keep me around, and I was just kind of drifting. Right. And so because of that, I didn't have any motivation to like get on the phones and like make these calls happen. I didn't have anything to do with my skill or anything. I just was like not motivated and focused enough. Dude, and then I started realizing like, dude, I have a focus issue. People started telling me about, it's like,
Vyvanse or whatever.
yeah, you like, there's a literal lack of dopamine there. It's a chemical thing or whatever. And so I had a visit with my doctor, and he was like, this is going to be a game changer because you're very self-aware of your situation. And it's going to be, the first time I took it, I would made like 93 calls before lunch. So I blew through like the quota before lunch, and I was like answering emails, and everyone has the same story, I'm sure, that like gets on this for the first time. But like, is it that easy? Like just to take some medicine and
then it's gone.
And then it's gone? Or is it this deeper emotional, like, is it really, like, I have these doubts, right? Like, I'm just being honest with you. Like, is it
we love the doubts.
Is it really my emotions that are going to like, all of a sudden, like, I don't need Vyvanse anymore because I've dealt with this emotion? I want that to be the case because I don't typically like being dependent upon anything, but
so there's no if somebody feels, or if you feel like you need to take medication, there's definitely no shame in taking medication.
Sure.
But what it does is it just treats the symptom, and the symptom is thoughts.
Is the focus issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That is the symptom of a root.
Yeah.
Which you will know for yourself exactly what that is as we talk more. But I've never seen it not be emotionally based out of hundreds, 1,000 plus people.
Cool.
Just so, just if you need any, I don't know, validation of that. So the cool thing is this is the solution that most people think we live in a culture that discounts and just doesn't understand emotions, period. That's the whole purpose of this podcast.
Yeah. Well, you got your first skeptic.
No, this is good. So it's you, however you want to, yeah, it's totally cool. But just one thought on that is, well, if you go and do all these scans and you get all these tests, it will show that there's a chemical imbalance in your brain, which is causing, and the doctor will say, this is what's causing your OCD and your inability to focus. We can see that there's a chemical imbalance. What's interesting is but very few people are actually looking at what's causing the chemical imbalance in the first place.
Right.
And the number one cause of all chemical imbalances in the body by a long shot is emotion. Negative emotion that is stored
and not dealt with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the only thing. Like there's real hormonal things that can be factors, and that's good to take a look at. Other things are good to take a look at. But I'm telling you, emotions is by a long shot. Like it's not even close. It's like 90% of the, I don't know the percentages. Some doctors that are more holistic believe 90% of all physical, he's talking about physical, 90% of all physical issues in people's bodies is stress and emotion based.
Yeah. Right.
90%. And that's just physical. But we're actually talking about a mental, and the connections between mental and emotions are way more than 90%.
Even stronger, right?
Way more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think anyone knows there's no way to, but
quantify it. Yeah.
Like I said, man, I've never seen a focus or OCD issue that you're describing and have it not be emotions be the root. So let's talk. We're going to come back to that. It's not super important for you to have that all dialed in now. What is important right now is the deeper why, and then you being able to start managing some of these thoughts and being able to put them in, controlling them a little bit better, perhaps, so that you can start to have a little bit more clarity that you will need to see the emotions. Okay. So, that's why it's still a little bit like, the skeptic thing and doubt. That's totally, we don't like, that's fine.
Yeah.
We need to free up a little bit of mental space so you can, or energy, you could put it, to start looking at emotionally what might be there.
So let me just give you an example of like answers that might be, or I guess that's the thing is I'm like trying to
the deeper why.
Yeah. I'm like trying to satisfy.
You do that on your own as homework. We're going to talk about thoughts for a second.
I guess I'm worried that they're all going to be wrong.
Wrong answers.
No, none of your your answers.
None of them are wrong.
See, my brain is just worried.
All of your answers are not. All your answers were right. You just try to get in touch with an emotional why.
Right. Yeah. It's
so keep asking yourself why. There's a reason.
Get really clear on that. Yeah.
So let's talk about thoughts for a second before we wrap up. So what has anything been helpful for you to be able to control your thoughts so that they're not controlling you?
For some reason, the immediate thing that came to mind was the aspect of truth, of thinking about like, what's the reality of the situation and trying to take an objective look at that, of objective, like truth.
That's great. That's great.
So,
that's really good. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. That's actually a strength of yours.
It's a reminder, right? That like, you've been here before, you can do this, that type of thing. Like this isn't foreign to you. You'll get through this or whatever.
Right.
If you have benefited from this podcast in any way, it would mean the world to us to have you subscribe, to allow us to keep it going and bring on inspirational human beings.